Fantastic to have you join us today. Thank you very much, my friend, for giving up some valuable time. I know you're a busy man, so how is the world treating you right now?
Very well. Yeah, I've been doing quite a lot of traveling recently, but it's good to be back in England, back at home. So yeah, very happy to be back with the family. So
There's been an awful lot happening with yourself and within CoreLogic recent times. So cast our minds back a few months, and you had the first IntrConnect Europe event, which I was there. I was present. Fantastic event. Thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you very much for the invite. So what's your reflections on that a few months out?
yes, actually, I was going to say, but I'll start with saying, I'm very proud of the team. I think, those, as you know, as an events business and, and thought leader in the industry, it's very difficult to do that kind of thing logistically. There's a lot more work than you expect. First time we've done events previously, but never to that scale with that level of production. So the team did an incredible job putting it together, putting it on. It seemed, everything went relatively smoothly. A couple of hiccups that we'll learn from, but I think, that's my general sense of the day. I think, grateful as well to the community for supporting us in coming to the event. You never know until the day when people start walking through the door. You never quite know how it's going to go. So that was really encouraging that people felt that we had something to say and that they wanted to be part of that event, and hopefully that will continue into the future.
Oh, fantastic. Well, no, great to hear. And as I say, super event. So, I mean, providing, fantastic insight into developments within CoreLogic, across the business kind of, strategy as well as the products. Can you summarize in a few sentences or a few words in terms of what those advances are and how they're supporting the sector?
Yeah, there's three, focus on claims, obviously, with this being Isle of Claims. There was obviously a lot more content than just claims for us this year, and that will continue for us in the international markets that we're trying to service. But from a claims perspective, singling out three things. First one is self-service. Obviously, it's a major investment for us, quite a big deal to go into that space and we're already in the consumer space with our link technology, obviously now used by a number of large businesses in the UK to support people within a claim journey. Now we're kind of thinking, as everybody knows, like, how do we start the process for the policyholder in a more digital and intuitive way? The next one I would mention is Digital Hub Connect, which is where we can, where we've built a new way for partners or members of our Digital Hub Alliance to integrate with our platform in claims, where they can create and deliver their own value to insurers through our integrated platform. So if an insurer has an existing relationship with a point solution who's doing something that they really like, whether that's, new ways of capturing floor plan information or whether it's the validation of contents, they can integrate that experience into our platform and create value for their users in a much easier way and in a way that's more flexible and scalable. So that was quite a big announcement. It was in the claims track, so some people may not have noticed it, but we're quite excited. And the last one is, using estimating databases to measure more than just cost. So measuring things like carbon input or output, measuring the impact of our work on the environment as an industry, and helping insurers meet their obligations, both for net zero, but also in terms of understanding their scope 3 emissions. I mean, that's quite a big piece of work. There's a lot of research done in that space anyway. So really what we're hoping to do is to bring some of those really excellent research projects and pieces of work that are done typically in the academic world and bring that to a business context to drive value for our market. So those are the kind of things I'd pull out. There was a lot more than that, but those are the things that are probably, from a claims perspective, front of mind for us in 2024.
So. Yeah, sure. And hey, really kind of, interesting subject matters there. And it leads me nicely on to my next question, strangely enough. So, you're kind of piecing all of these bits together behind the scenes. And we heard from yourself at Claims Tech Live in September. And that centered around the kind of the key themes of, several of the bits you've just discussed, not so much product-wise, but the value of data. The need for collaboration, integration, transparency, technology as an enabler of choice. Which I think is, hugely important as well. So in a highly competitive market, which, the insurance world is, how can that become a reality? I think you've probably touched on some of those bits just a moment ago, and how do we engender trust across the supply chain. It's a classic subject that we often talk about, really, from a consumer angle as well as the supply chain.
Yeah, I think it's quite a difficult. Well, it's a big question, first of all, and I think there's a couple of things that I'd say. I think the first one is that in a and it is a very competitive market, particularly as volume has decreased, and we can talk a little bit perhaps about how that may change and how supply chain capacity is something that needs to change, really, as we see increases in weather event frequency and severity. So that's one issue the industry has to address, which I won't touch on in this response. But I think on the way that we see technology as an enabler is that all these businesses are trying to differentiate themselves, and typically they do that through service, price, and technology quite often. And technology is a driver of service. So a lot of these businesses are trying to differentiate themselves using their own technology, which is different or better to their competitors in particular value that they're delivering. So it's quite difficult to kind of, when you try and standardize, or when you try and create a standard way of working, there is a certain amount of commercial resistance, if you like, from people who say, well, actually, I don't want to use yours because it removes my ability or undermines my ability to differentiate myself. But I think as an industry, and I would say this, right, because we're the ones who are trying to standardize the technology, but there's a reason why I think it's the right thing to do, and that is that those businesses are fundamentally service businesses, right? They're businesses that are delivering outcomes for policyholders, and something that we're never going to do, nor have we ever done, right, in the insurance world. And I think we focus very much on making their jobs easier and making it easier for them to do their work and deliver their value, and so it's really about horses for courses, if you like, which is a bit of a cliched phrase, but that's the way we think of it. And then what we believe, or I believe in particular in the UK, is that the visibility created by collaboration platforms actually frees up people to focus on the customer outcomes more. What it does is it creates visibility for the insurer, which is an opportunity to do one of two things, right? If you get visibility, you can either do, okay, now I know it, now I know I can see, I'm only going to look at the exceptions. And I'm going to let people get on and collaborate and work to drive the outcomes. Or you can say, well, now I can see, I'm going to look at everything in a really micromanaged way. And I think different insurers culturally have different approaches. I would say overall, though, this kind of visibility and openness of data in terms of the data that's created through the work and the visibility of progress and process and cost is moving insurers towards a more collaborative way of working with their suppliers, because they don't feel like they're in the dark. They don't feel like, I don't really know what's going on until I get an invoice, which 15 years ago was very much the way the market worked. I think now it's more about, well, okay, I know, I can see what's going on and how these things are working. There is a more relaxed approach, or I hope that would be the outcome, and that can drive collaboration. And so I hope that in turn that will drive better outcomes for everybody internally, for the suppliers able to focus on their own value and their own technology in many cases that drives value. Whether that's real expert solutions that do things that nobody else can do because they're in their industry, and we're not going to do those things because that's not our bag, if you like. They can drive that value, they can drive service value, they can drive cost value as well for the insurers. It creates that opportunity for us all to be better and to improve the outcomes. It's just about how the technology is deployed and what's the strategy that's used once it is deployed. Like because it can go one of two ways. But overall, I think we're doing the right thing in terms of how this technology is influencing the market.
And it's very interesting. Again, it kind of comes down, and the way I always kind of look at things is technology, as you say, an enabler, and what technology does. It's amazing. I am no techie in any way, shape, or form, but some of the things I see out there, incredible. But behind that technology, there is a strategy, a culture, and down to kind of individuals, ultimately people at the end of the day. So I think it all adds value back into that, which is exactly
it's another cliche, but they say culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
If you try and deploy something that's really great and innovative and collaborative, but the culture isn't there to support it, and people don't feel empowered to say, okay, I'm now going to stop doing all the the work that I used to do in the past, then it won't make any difference. Like, you've got to change. That's why it's called transformation. That's why it's not called implementation, because it won't work unless you go all the way and try and make people understand the value that you're trying to deliver through the strategy. And the technology is an enabler for the strategy. It is not the strategy itself. We've always said that. So it's an opportunity. People have got to take it, and they've got to, we'll see. We'll see how that pans out as technology increases its influence.
Yeah, absolutely. In what way will consumer duty motivate businesses to take a more collaborative approach in claims, do you think?
I was thinking about consumer. I was talking to, as you may remember, at the event we had Admiral on stage. We were talking about the impact of consumer duty on things like product, because I think that the intention of the legislation is more around choice and understanding, and making sure that products are fit for purpose at the point of sale. But once you get under that initial kind of headline, it's all about service and product, which means claims, right? And so I think one of the things seems to be driving now, everybody interprets legislation slightly differently, but generally speaking, I think one of the things that's coming out of it is about consistency. So it was weird, because it's like, I want to be consistent, but I also want to be specific to the customer. Like, I've got to give them choice. I've got to acknowledge their individual needs. And I've also got to treat them fairly in a consistent way with everybody else. Like, just because somebody is perhaps vulnerable, I can't treat them differently to somebody that's not, because I have to tailor them. I have to understand their needs. I think that drives a requirement for a couple of things. It drives a requirement for increased choice for the policyholder, which is already there in many cases. Like, let's be clear, like, we as an industry, if you compare us to, again, 10, 15 years ago, like, we are so customer centric now compared to where we were. Certainly at a kind of cultural level, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of culture and the importance of culture, like, every insurer, customer, like, very much so, in particular in claims. And I think, so there's a lot of customer choice already, but this is not now more about how do you make the options different? Because if you buy a product and you understand that you're going to get, claim service A from product A, but then actually you buy a slightly different product from the same business, are you going to get a different service? Or are you going to get exactly the same claim service regardless of how much you paid for your policy? So I think there's a bit of that's maybe going to change the way claims strategies are formulated, which will in turn affect supply chain strategies. The question that we don't know yet is whether this legislation and the consumer choice that it will facilitate, if you like, will have an impact on things like supply chain volume. Or are we going to see increases or decreases in cash settlement? Is supply chain capacity going to be affected positively or negatively? Like, we all know there's an issue. That's because it's been eroded over many, many years. Can it be rebuilt? How fast can it be rebuilt? Is it required? We don't know. But I think if we follow a hypothesis that says there's going to be more volume in the supply chain, that will require insurers to facilitate businesses to create that capacity, which means collaborating, paying for the service in an appropriate way so that people can scale. And I think that, so that, it's kind of it's not tenuous, but it's a stepped change. Like, we don't yet know what the impact is going to be, because it's quite a long way down the value chain, and it will ultimately be driven by consumer choice, which is very difficult to predict. So the answer is we don't know, but it's certainly changing the way insurers are choosing suppliers, how they're choosing to distribute claims, and what options are provided to the policyholder in the process. That's certainly what we're seeing as well already. But how it impacts the industry as a whole, yet to be seen.
Very, very interesting. Again, alluded to it from the outset. There was a strong focus on AI at the IntrConnect, and it's firmly on trend. How are you kind of using AI within the business currently, and what's the future vision within CoreLogic?
So I think, AI is a catch-all, right? It's a catch-all for really the ability to process large amounts of information faster than was previously expected. So what AI is, people have built tools to do large language analysis and prediction, predictive things, so things that necessarily, and sometimes, as we all know, like the predictions are wrong, but for the most part, they're pretty good, frankly. Certainly in things like Chat GPT and the impact that that's going to have. But I think that's what it's about. It's about taking very large amounts of data that would take years to process in terms of human evaluation, or maybe would never even be attempted. That's the key thing, like particularly on imagery. Like looking at the volume of imagery to discern information was not something anybody would even have attempted because it wasn't economic and you just never would have done it. And now it's possible. So, it's a catch-all for technologies that are able to process the information faster. But what often happens is that people confuse automation with AI. They're not the same thing, right? So we're focusing on a couple of things, right? So first of all, the majority of our business is a data business. We sell data. We sell data on individual properties. We sell data on portfolios. We sell data on catastrophe modeling. We sell data when it relates to property valuations, mortgage underwriting, insurance, the whole thing. Okay. And so, yes, we have a huge amount of investment going on within our business on the use of AI to create new data sets from existing data models and existing data sets. So how can we gain insight from imagery or text or whatever, weather data that we wouldn't necessarily have been able to process it wouldn't have been economical to do that manually in the past, right? That's happening a lot, and we're driving significant new insight from the data that we already provide. So whether that's in terms of damage in relating to claims, or whether it's in terms, as I say, in terms of underwriting and hazard, there's a lot of value being created there for our customers, for our existing customers, and also in terms of new products. One example, which I've talked about before, but it's just a really good illustrative example, is where we have in the US relationship, and we provide technology to the property listings industry, in the realtors and real estate industry. And when you take front elevation photographs of a house in a claims context or an insurance context versus a property marketing context, the quality is very different, right? So in a property marketing context, it's great, stationary camera, it's framed well, you got lots of information. Google Street View, not so much, right? So that gives us a unique data set from which we can derive a data point for each property. And this is in the United States, but for each property, which is the first floor height. So we can say from ground level, also knowing the topology of the area in relation to, sea level,
yep,
we can tell what the height of that first floor is by looking at these images. And we've developed that data set now using AI completely from existing imagery, and we've created a new, in effect, derived data source. Massively valuable for CAT modeling, for hazard, understanding hazard on a property, in particular flood, well, obviously flood. And so that's an example of true AI, right? We've used image recognition and image modeling to create a data set. In claims, we're not quite there yet. Like on image recognition, damage recognition, materials recognition, loads of work being done on that within our business, but also through partnerships. But in claims, what's really valuable and what's kind of the first thing that I think, and what we're kind of focusing on, is automation. So automation is about taking high volume processes and automating them, or making the process where manual intervention is required easier. So the information that's required to make decisions is provided faster, in higher quality. And so we spend a lot of time in claims focusing on that. And I think in particular, the stuff we're doing around the self-service, obviously when the expectation of the user, and this will translate into our business user products as well. But when the user expectation is super fast, I want it slick, I don't want to have to think about it, I want the information provided really efficiently, I want to be asked very simple questions so that I can get through the process, that's where that automation becomes very useful. So, image recognition is part of it, things like contents item recognition and inventory, things like pricing of contents items in an automated way using, science that's developed by very large businesses with much larger AI budgets than us, is quite exciting. But it's about how it's deployed in a workflow. It's all right having science and the capability. It's about how it's deployed in a workflow. And that's where, in a claims context, we think we've got kind of a real advantage, which is that we can put the technology in the right place at the right time to help the user make a choice, make a decision, and be better and more efficient at their work.
Obviously technology-driven world that we're kind of in, and lots of focus on automation, AI for the future. What importance, and we've kind of touched upon it a couple of times here, but what importance do you place on the human aspects of kind of recruiting and upskilling, at CoreLogic?
Well, I think, when I'm in the US, one of the big things that's talked about is skills. I call it skills. We say it in the UK as well, skills. We've got skill gaps, we've got skill deficits, we've got and that is absolutely the case. Like that is an issue for everyone in every industry, particularly in technology. Like finding developers, well, we call them engineers now, finding engineers, finding systems architects, finding designers, finding people who can solve these big problems that are, innovating and iterating on some of these challenges is very hard, and they're very expensive, and they're getting more expensive, and we're not creating enough of them. So that's one problem. I would say the same, ironically, for traditional skills. In the US, being a loss adjuster is a licensed profession. It is here as well, right? Of course, but obviously those skills are there's a massive gap in relation to there's been a retirement, they call it a retirement tidal wave, where there was a lot of recruitment in that sector, say 20 years ago, maybe even longer. People are retiring, they're not being replaced. There's a capacity issue. That's been an issue. Same in the construction industry. The construction industry saying, well, actually, insurance doesn't pay. I need to do other work. I have to diversify. And so, AI is not going to solve those problems, right? Let's just be clear. Like, just because I can identify damage in an image doesn't mean that I can understand the cause of the loss, or whether it's been gradually operating, or I can't understand if I look at a ceiling. This is a great one that everybody goes, when are you going to be able to do image to scope? And we say, well, we're working on it, right? And the reason it's hard is because if you look at a ceiling, you don't know what it's made of because it's painted, right? You can guess, but you're guessing, and you can guess based on a number of different things, but you still don't know till you knock a hole in it. Or even if it's got a hole in it already, it's still particularly difficult to tell what level of severity the damage is. Like, so it's about materials, severity, and all those things are they're not going to, I don't think, certainly for a severe losses, simple things, water damage, staining, things like that, not as difficult, but significant damage, very difficult to do. Also, you can't fix a roof or a ceiling with an AI either. Somebody has to go out with a hammer and a set of tools and actually reinstate it. So I think, the human aspect is very important in the context of actually affecting outcomes, but it's also important at the front end, because it's going to be a very long time, and I don't think it'll ever happen, where every single individual will want to talk, will be comfortable speaking to an AI to resolve their claim.
Great points, great point. And hear it everywhere we go in terms of that human resource need requirement out there. So it is fascinating. As much as we talk about technology, again, it is kind of the need for human skills, empathy, and everything we can bring to the party is more so there than ever before, perhaps. So it's really interesting dynamic. Mike, that is superb. I mean, that kind of, if you like, brings us to the end of the formal interview. Not that we'd ever use that terminology, but it's been great. So what one thing might not many people know about Mike Porter? I'm
a cyclist.
Okay. Interesting.
That might be something they don't know about me. Not very interesting. A lot of people are cyclists, but yes, I am a very keen cyclist. I'm one of those lockdown cyclists.
Are you?
I got involved. I started in 2020 and then became rapidly obsessed with it. And now I'm one of those people who walks around in Lycra at the weekend and takes himself very seriously when he's doing it. So I'm a cyclist.
Fantastic stuff, Mike. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. and look forward to catching up with you again very soon.
Thank you. Really enjoyed the chat. Thank you.